Can you shoot dreamy long exposures with just a tiny camera and a lightweight tripod? Let's find out. I've always thought that long exposures were reserved for people with heavy cameras, fancy tripods, and loads of time. But I wanted to see if I could pull it off with a lightweight setup, limited dexterity, and a little bit of trial and error. So I headed to Hastings with my Ricoh GRIIX with its 40mm lens to see what all the fuss was about. I'm not claiming that this is a perfect how-to, it's more of an experiment. But if you're curious about trying long exposures with minimal gear or limited mobility and would like some composition tips along this journey, hopefully this gives you a few ideas and encouragement to try it yourself. I wanted to keep the whole thing lightweight as possible, hence the tiny Ricoh camera, and I also took this carbon fibre Manfrotto B3 tripod, which weighs just 1.6 kilograms, and that's along with a tiny small rig ball head. For the ND filter, I decided to use this Gobe or Gobi, whatever it's called, ND 1000, which has a 10-stop light reduction. That means in theory you can stretch the shutter speed to 20 seconds or more, depending upon the light conditions and the time of day. And obviously I'm using a wired shutter release cable. You wouldn't want to do long exposures without one. Now, because I have a disability in my arms and don't have the best dexterity in my fingers, I knew that if I kept screwing and unscrewing the ND filter, I would most definitely drop it on the ground repeatedly and end up crying. So I decided to keep the filter on the lens the whole time, which isn't the textbook approach, I know, but it allowed me to respond quickly and easily to changing light. So let's jump right in. First stop is this beautiful rocky cliff and seascape at the edge of Great Britain called Rock-a-Nore. To keep things simple and avoid any mental or physical anguish, I didn't use a calculator or a fixed formula. If you're shooting long exposures, start in manual mode, lock your ISO at 100 and use a narrow aperture like f11 to f16 for better depth and light control. Then adjust your shutter speed and use your histogram to guide exposure. Keeping the filter on the lens, I just worked by eye, checking the histogram to get the exposure right. I adjusted the shutter speed until the histogram looked balanced, usually landing somewhere between 8 and 13 seconds. That said, if you prefer more structure, there are exposure calculators and apps out there that can help you figure out a good starting point when using ND filters. It was fairly early in the day and the sun was strong, so I was a bit disappointed that I couldn't get longer exposures than around 13 seconds. I was hoping to smooth the water as much as possible and get some nice streaks in the sky. The wind affects how streaky the clouds appear too. And whilst I was lucky that it wasn't very windy, great for tripod stability, the clouds weren't really moving in the right direction, as they can create leading lines in the sky if the wind's in your favour. For Rock-a-Nore, I had two different kinds of composition in mind. One minimalist with smooth water and a lot of negative space, and the other using large rocks as a strong foreground element that also works as a leading line across the left-hand side of the frame. To bring out those rocks a little bit more in Lightroom, I just used the brush tool and some clarity and texture in the foreground. The next stop was Hastings Harbour Arm with the picturesque rocks leading to those large bollards in the water. For this composition, I literally just wanted the rocks and bollards leading in from the right side of the frame and lining up neatly with the rule of thirds intersection, which creates this minimalist shot which is surrounded by smooth water. With some serious light still going on, I was still only able to get an 8-second exposure. On all of the shots, I played around with the focus, but mainly using auto area autofocus to see if the images would be sharp whilst using an ND filter. And I can happily say that every shot I took using autofocus came out completely sharp without any blurring. For this shot, I couldn't easily get past the metal safety rail as it's not the tallest tripod, so I will just remove that right now. Just a quick one, please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to take your learning even further, I've just got a couple of new membership options right here on YouTube. So just check them out if you want to improve your photography. Thank you very much. I took a number of different style shots at the fishing quarter, a couple of vibey seascapes, a few boat shots, though most of them probably didn't need a long exposure at all. I managed to capture this couple who are lying very still, so there was no issues in capturing them without any blurring. I think I first photographed these groynes way back when I first started photography, and I didn't think I could do street photography, and I also had no idea how to take a long exposure. This was one of my favourite long exposures, shot with the Ricoh GRIIX and the ND1000 filter. The wooden groynes break up in the water beautifully, and that beacon just adds enough tension to the frame. The whole structure sits right at the edge where the tide meets the beach, and with an 8-second exposure, the sea turns almost ghostly. Finally, I hit the pier. I wanted to incorporate some of the pier's architecture as well as the smooth seawater in the background. Just 6-second exposures, but I think I got what I was after. F11 really works well here, as you want to see those buildings in the distance, especially that one that's designed to look like a ship. Here's some B-roll for this location, which apologies as I accidentally missed the footage from the shot, but another subject was sitting as still as possible, so I managed to get some street photography in whilst I was doing long exposures. I made sure that this ornate looking street lamp was on the very right edge of the frame so that it could add balance to the hut on the left of the frame and the subject's position in the composition. Also, you can see that the planks of wood work as a subtle leading line that lead right up to the subject sitting down. So I hope that this exploration gives you some food for thought if you want to start taking some long exposures. You can keep the ND filter on your camera and adjust the exposure until it's correct. You might also be able to use autofocus with your camera. You can also borrow my composition ideas, whether you prefer shooting minimalist shots or something busier with foreground elements and architecture worked into the frame. Obviously, if you're shooting later in the day or there's more overcast clouds, you'll probably get to work with even longer shutter speeds, which will give you even smoother water and streakier clouds. And if the wind is blowing towards you or away from you, then you're golden. Now, if you want to take your photography learning even further, then check out this video here. Until we meet again, go forth and create.